Are you ready to transform your restaurant into a profit powerhouse? In this episode, we are joined by two of the executives at Dinetec, where they talk, Kim and Rafi talk a ton about their strategies on how to lay out a menu, the different ways that you can move people's behavior through the menu, and how to truly understand how to get what you're looking for out of your guests, as well as deliver an amazing guest experience. We talk about data, design, automation, and how you can use some new AI tools that they've got to strategically engineer your menu to not only deliver a fantastic guest experience, but also to make your business more profitable. Stay tuned until the end, where we talk quite a bit about some of the results that we've seen from certain restaurants when they engage with the Dinetec team. If you don't know me, my name is Jeremy Julian. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for CBS North Star, wrote the North Star point of sale solution for multi-units. Please check us out at cbsnorthstar.com. And now on to the episode. Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. I thank everyone out there for joining us. As I like to say each and every episode, I know you guys have got lots of choices, so thank you for hanging out with us today. For those that see on video, you'll see that we have two guests today, and it's going to be fun to be bouncing back and forth with Kim and Rafi. But cool topic today, and funny enough, I've not ever had a guest on before that's kind of talked about this topic. So I'm selfishly really intrigued to kind of hear what they do to try and make the dining experience the way that they do. But Kim, why don't you, ladies first, why don't you introduce yourself? Who is Kim?
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Kim Opdyke. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Dinetec. Dinetec is the menu and dining division of Sandy Alexander, which is our parent company. And I'm somewhat of a self-proclaimed menu nerd. I've worked in the casual dining space. I always date myself for over a couple decades, and just really enjoy bringing technology and solutions in this space and seeing how we can enhance the guest experience. I'm going to introduce you and send it over to Rafi, who's our VP of Technology at Sandy Alexander. He makes all this stuff happen. So he's the guy
I love it.
who
I
run
love
it
it. But
up.
we are going to have to dig into what a menu nerd is, Kim, before we get off the call, because
Okay, fair enough.
I'm certain if I go look it up on the internet, people are going to be like, "Oh, what's a menu nerd?" But
Menu
Rafi,
nerd.
why don't you introduce yourself real quick, and what do you get the privilege of doing for Dine Tech?
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Rafi Chehirian, and I'm the VP of Technology, as Kim noted, for Sandy Alexander. And I've been in that position for almost a decade, and I've had a pleasure to work with Kim for a lot of that time, most of that time. And a big part of my job is to support our menu print initiatives from a technology perspective and build all the cool stuff that we're going to talk about today.
I love it. Kim, since you started with the menu nerd comment, what is a menu nerd at first, real quick, and then let's talk a little bit about kind of what is Dine Tech as a subdivision or a subset of Sandy Alexander, real quick. Kind of what do you guys do? Kind of set the groundwork of kind of why
Okay.
a menu nerd first, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you guys get to do for casual dining brands.
I'm a menu nerd because I'm also a bit of a marketing nerd. And, the menu is like the most important piece of collateral that a restaurant brand has once a guest comes into the restaurant, right? It has to fit with the brand. It has to deliver on the brand promise. It guides what guests order. It guides check, impact, and it is just an enormous amount of touch points that you almost don't even think about. And then, so once I got in this business, I was like, you mean all of this stuff happens behind the scenes to help me make one decision once I come into a restaurant and sit down and decide what to order? So just the process, everything from deciding what dishes go on a menu to how you price it to what versions may be needed for what part of the country that they're in. So it's actually a very complex process that we really try to simplify and streamline and work with our brands as much as we can. So it is kind of a scientific nerdy thing, and I've just kind of been in that space for a long time. As far as Dinetec goes, it's the dining division of Sandy Alexander. And we really specialize, without being too cliche, everything from data through delivery. So, our understanding really goes to everything from how effective your menu needs to be to how efficient it needs to be and how accurate it needs to be. And just really trying to help with all of those touch points. So from engineering, deciding to see what a guest is going to see first, to automating and centralizing data, menu data, to print and national distribution is really our core competency.
Well, and I think it's fun. Like I said, when you guys approached to try and be on the show, I've heard inklings of kind of menu engineering. I've heard those phrases kind of in and around the space over my career. But I'd love for both of you guys to talk a little bit about what even does that mean. You kind of alluded to it, and I know a little bit of inside baseball, Kim. You've lived this for a long time. So, but for those listeners out there that are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just put the items that I want to sell and I put a price on them and I hope they sell. And if they don't sell, too tough, and I move them. And if they do sell, great. I just make sure that I have enough product to be able to serve that. But to your point, there's a lot of data behind that. I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about overarching, I guess, in general, from a brand that truly gets it for a casual dining. I guess holistically, talk about what even is menu engineering from a physical menu all the way through to recognizing the data. And Rafi, maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well to understand that. I'd love to kind of just give a huge overview because I know there's a lot of listeners out there that are like, dude, I like eating Philly cheesesteak, so I put a Philly cheesesteak on my menu, and I know that I'd pay $11.95 for it, so I put $11.95 on the menu. Or I know my food cost is here, and that's what I do, but I know that's not really how you should do it, using data and using science as well as marketing and art to do that, I guess.
Well, I'll kick it off on the engineering side, and then I'll let Rafi take it from there. Yeah. So if you do have a Philly cheesesteak and you know that it's $11.95, right? So, with menu engineering, we kind of look at the format of the menu. So whether it's like a single panel, a bifold, a trifold. So we look at the format of the menu. We look at your design and your graphics, because if your Philly cheesesteak is your best seller, then you want to make sure that your guests see your bestseller within the first 3 to 5 seconds of looking at your menu. So you really want to look at positioning of that item, whether it gets an icon, whether it gets a call out photograph, because all of those things draw a guest's attention to that item. So sometimes you want to highlight an item. Sometimes you may want to carry an item, but you don't want to draw too much attention to it. So it's really engineering or guiding your viewer to the items that you really want them to order, so you have a good check. So you drive revenue, I guess, if it is the best.
So you're getting them to get the best items that you can deliver consistently, that you can make the most amount of money on, is kind of what I've heard from people.
And it's true. And guests, the funny thing about guests don't read menus. They scan them, right?
They look at the pictures, they look at the items that have the highlights, they have the favorite button, they have the star next to them, and they go, that must be the best item here because I've never been here, right?
Never been here, or I have been here and I know that's my favorite item. But using technology to make the selection and ordering process easy for your guest is really important. I mean, because you can engineer and map a menu and it can still be too busy. So you really want to make sure you've looked at the number of items in a section, how they're ordered within a section. And to your point, if they get a call out, if they get an image, all of those things, but knowing that, this is how I make money and this is where I live or I would like to live. So structuring that menu to really work smart for you is really what we try to help do.
Rafi, talk to me a little bit about how data plays a part in this, because again, I know that way too many times, and we've all watched the John Taffer or Robert Irvine or Gordon Ramsay yelling at a restaurant operator on TV about how they design their menu and what items go on there. But I think all too often, restaurateurs, they don't really look at the data. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the data and how that plays a part into this whole conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a one-off restaurant, what Kim talked about, that's pretty much the end of your journey. You design your menu, you take advantage of where things are placed, and you put in your pricing based on, some research that you've done, and that's the end of it, right? And then your data might be, traffic data or usage data, or, what somebody buys at your particular restaurant. What we specialize in, right, where we have to extend our solution and in the restaurant space is when you're a corporate brand that has 600, 1,000 locations or something like that, right? So then the story just doesn't end with, I designed my menu and we know that things are positioned where they're supposed to be positioned. Now I have all sorts of data that I have to generate different versions of any one particular menu. So even if you have a single menu, like a dinner menu, and you have 1,000 locations, I might have to generate up to 1,000 different versions based on different
Wow.
variables on the menu, right? So I basically have 1,000 menus now. And if you have 3 or 4 different menu types, like if you have a dessert menu and a brunch menu, and might be looking at 3,000 different versions of your menus that you have to print. That's where our data solutions come into play to help corporations try and solve for all of their restaurants and all the versions of their menu that they need. Right. Ultimately, after that, it's up to them to analyze their POS data and whatever goes on in the store. But where we help the industry is first we centralize your data, all of your pricing data, and all of your item data, and all of your location data. Will profile your locations, and we'll centralize all that data in one place. Historically, the way people would solve for that is they would just shuffle through spreadsheets and would go blind on spreadsheets for months until they figure out, what is my starting point for this next thing that I have to generate 500, different versions of my dinner menu, and who does it go to, and how do I even go about doing it, right? It's a very stressful endeavor, and that's one of the biggest pain points is that we solve for is you take all of that data, which is usually pricing data and location data and item data, and we centralize it, and we give the brand access to it. And then the next thing we do is we allow the restaurants to map that data onto digital menus. We'll create digital versions of your menus, and then once we do that and we map items and pricing based on your locations, profiles, we're able to generate how many versions you actually need for your restaurants. It's another
Which is
big pain point that. Go ahead. Sorry, Kim.
no, I'm sorry. I was going to say, which is the really huge advantage, because being able to get a very quick snapshot of how many versions that I have, who's
Hmm.
on that version, and then why is that version different from the next menu version, and then being able to make business decisions. Is that version necessary? Because if a version doesn't drive preference or profit, you probably don't need it unless it's for some legal or nutritional manner. So really being able to visually look at what's different, and some of the reporting tools Rafi will probably touch on, is really amazing, because it really gives brand marketers a really very clear, concise picture of all of their menu data and what makes it different and who's on it. And it's a snapshot that you can get instantaneously, which really didn't exist years ago.
Well, that was where I was going. I got enough gray hairs here to remember the days back when menus were like printed and you'd have like these little cutouts and people would move them around. You guys are going to laugh at me, but that's how you used to design the menus, is you'd have a
Yeah.
full layout. And even something you said earlier, Kim, that I guess I'd love to dig in a little bit, a trifold versus a bifold versus a spiral bound, versus a single sheet. Those are all conscious decisions that it sounds like you guys work through with these brands. And I guess what goes into that? And again, having have done business with the Cheesecake Factory for over 20 years, they've got their spiral bound notebook that everybody's like, oh my gosh, that thing's crazy. And that is a conscious decision, because they do 200 menu items made from scratch every day in the store versus somebody else that might be a single page. I guess I'd love to talk through a little bit of that, because it is a little bit of art and it is a little bit of science that goes into that as you guys are working with these brands.
Yeah, no, it is. You're right. It's a little combination, I would say, of art and science. I think a lot of it has to do with what is your core brand philosophy. Who do you want to feel like, and who is your guest? Because
Hmm.
that's going to kind of drive a lot of it. If you go fine dining, you rarely find a trifold menu with photos in it. But ironically, we all know we eat with our eyes. But if you're
Uh-huh.
in a casual dining segment where we kind of specialize, the combination between items and photography and icons is kind of a standard, because it is what resonates with the guest. So we work a lot with, who is your end user or your end guest? What kind of marketplace are you in, and what do you want your brand to feel like? Because we've worked with brands before and have done engineering and some other studies, and it was very much like, we don't want to use photography. That's not who we are. We started out as like this really cool, hip, trendy food truck, and pictures aren't our thing. And it's like, okay, but you now have 200 restaurants, and you're in the,
You're in the
fast.
suburbs where you got kids that are
Yeah.
making the decisions. You need to
Sure,
drive that,
sure.
right?
I'm like, I appreciate your hipness, my friend, all good. So you'll go through and you can do we've done different studies, and that's also kind of like a brand decision, because we can clearly demonstrate in that segment, we do eat with our eyes. So items that are photographed or photography within a menu will drive sales to those items versus a menu without any photography. But like I said, if your brand is, this is what we want to feel like, that's fine. We can help either way. Really, with formatting, we really look at the number of items that a brand might have. Your point with Cheesecake Factory and their wire bound menu. We look at how long the menu is going to be in restaurant. So how many times do they print a year? Because that can drive things like what type of stock you print on. So if you're going to switch your menus out every 8 or 12 weeks, you probably don't need to print on a synthetic, but you might want to anyway. But really just understanding what the menu initiative is, how long it's going to be in restaurant, kind of at the core who your brand is and who your guest is, and then taking all of those things into consideration, and then really also leveraging and optimizing size and formats that best fit manufacturing equipment, so
Okay.
we can really leverage our equipment to get you to market faster. So speed to market is always an important factor when you're doing a national rollout, right? You have an in-restaurant date, you have an in-restaurant date, you have a live date, and you want to get there as efficiently and effectively as possible. So we try to work with brands to do those things and create those different formats with different stocks.
Well, and I think that goes into kind of the next line of questioning, which is it's not cheap to print menus. We know that. Again, it's not inexpensive to do it. And so doing it right and doing it right the first time is a huge piece. And I know that there's oftentimes friction in the franchise world. So I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about how you guys help to ensure that the franchisees can see what the value of these new menu printing, it's dictated by corporate. We're doing this rollout. You're going to be taking these new menu items. You're going to be taking these things off. But we also know that it drives behavior. You guys have talked about the data behind it and the behavior that it changes. I'd love for you guys to talk about how you guys help franchisees and really franchisors to be able to deliver this product to the place that they can be national at these brands that are 500 or 1,000 stores, because that's a huge deal to create consistency across the board.
Yeah, it definitely is. You want brand consistency for a national level, but you want your individual franchisees to be able to have input and make business decisions. It's because it's just a different operating model than a completely corporate model. So I'm going to let Rafi take this because we've developed some really cool technology that really allows for brand consistency, but has really streamlined the franchise involvement and really making that process easier. And it's back to being a menu nerd. It's like super cool stuff. So I'm going to let the
Yeah,
super.
no, I saw you guys was right up on it. I'm like, I need to I'm going to sound ignorant if I try and give you guys
Mhm.
details. So, Rafi, I'd love for you to kind of explain. Because, again, I think we all have seen this push and pull in the restaurant space of
Mhm.
franchisees want control, but they don't want total control. Corporate wants control, but they know they've got to get flexible. And so I'd love for you to talk about how tech is enabling that from
Sure.
a menu selection perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've worked with some really big franchise brands, and we have our software working for some really big franchise brands that have that exact dynamic. The franchise owners are pushing and pulling with corporate, and they're like, we want to be able to make these decisions, and that's the key thing is franchisees want to make decisions at the restaurant level. So I can't just dictate, from as a corporate person how much your eggs are going to be. You have to figure that out. 500 to 1,000 franchise owners, I have to have 500 to 1,000 decisions made, and we have to synchronize that decision making process so that we can get the pricing in, compose menus, and print them and have them in restaurant, on time. Right? There's these national rollouts that go on every 3-4 months, and
Mhm.
this is used to be a synchronization nightmare between franchise owners and corporate. Right? So that's one of the biggest problems that we solve with the franchise version of Dinetec 360 is we created, an end-to-end workflow that allows franchise owners to go in and seamlessly figure out all the things that they need for the decisions that they have to make, provide that data in a short order window. That data doesn't have to make it anywhere. Our software will take the data, will take the creative that was approved by corporate, will generate PDFs, we'll spit them back out to the franchisees and say, here's an actual PDF of the menu that you just created. Does it look right? Right. And we'll
Yeah.
put them through that loop of that proof and approval loop that just didn't used to exist in the market other than people sending data over email or smoke signals or whatever, and then somebody will put together a PDF and email it back to them and be like, "Is this right?" Well, that round
Yeah, or
trip
the
is
menu would say
really
Budweiser and somebody would have to cross out Budweiser because they don't sell
right.
Budweiser in that store. We've all seen that
Exactly.
too.
Hmm.
Exactly. So you have like these marked up menus that like go back and forth over email, and email is like this really slow process, right? So bottom line is what we did is we empowered franchise owners to be able to go in there, put in all their variables that they want, and then just in real time generate PDFs and proof them on the fly. And if they have issues, they can just go back one step or two steps and update pricing or whatever variable they want to update, regenerate their PDF. And when they're happy with it, they say, okay, I'm happy with it. Thumbs up, they approve it, and then now that just automatically translates to an order that Sandy captures and produces when the end of the order window is closed, right? The
Hmm.
entire thing is automated end to end. Our orders go from the software into our print production workflows. So there's really no hiccups between the time that franchisees open an order window, select all the variables that they want to have input on, and then print gets produced and delivered to them. Another really cumbersome process that used to take a really, really long time that we compressed into something that franchisees can do for a day. The problem statement used to be, hey, and we had several, franchise groups really state the problem this way. Hey, I have to go into this existing software 3 or 4 times over the course of several weeks to be able to, complete my menus. It's driving me crazy. I don't remember what I did last week. I have to pick up from where I left off. Who knows? This is taking me way too long, and we need something better. Two, some of the testimonials that we've had since we've launched the software was, hey, same guy, I got my work done in less than a day. Amazing. The menus made their way over to my restaurants. I only have to log into the software one time, make my decisions, click OK, and move on with my life, right? These are owner operators that don't have time to be sitting around and logging into portals and trying to do it several times over the course of several weeks, right? So they could just get menus in the restaurant. So,
Well, it's not what they do.
right. So that's
Yeah, it's
it's
not
not what
what
they
they
do,
do. They
right?
should be out in the front of the house. They should be with their staff. They should be with their guests, not
Yeah,
messing around with menus because corporate decided to do some LTO that's coming out and now they got to go approve it, right?
right. Yeah, they're operators.
Exactly.
We're talking, good guest experience, hot food hot, cold food cold. If I got to go in and make some item and pricing decisions, you know, just making it as easy and as painless as possible. And to Rafi's point, really being able to drive weeks out of a timeline. So again, that whole speed to market, giving brands and franchise brands the flexibility to be really nimble
hmm
in,
and the word nimble and franchisor does not exist in most places. So the
I
fact that you
know.
guys have figured out technology and how to enhance that is awesome.
Yeah.
So,
I think really a game changer.
well, and I really love that you guys have started at the core. You said, sitting and looking at what the pain points are and saying, what, how do I make it easier? Because you still need to get the answers. You still need to get approval that this is what their menu is going to look like. Today's episode is brought to you by Restaurant Technologies Incorporated. They are the leaders in automated cooking oil management. And if you're not familiar with them, they've been on the show a few times to share some of the unique and cool things that they've been doing in the oil management space. They have an end-to-end closed-loop automated system that helps deliver, monitor, filter, collect, and recycle your cooking oil. Sounds like a lot. It's because they do a ton to help clean up one of the dirtiest jobs and most dangerous jobs in your kitchen. You can check them out by visiting rti-inc.com or by calling 888-779-5314. They've already helped over 45,000 customers in the United States with their cooking oil, so clearly they're doing something right. Now back to the episode. How do I use technology to enhance that rather than a marked up PDF with somebody scribbling and scanning it back or taking a picture with their phone and emailing it? The fact that you guys have put this on a portal and allowed them the flexibility to have what they need, but not increase their workload is awesome. Real quick, just for my own education, where does PLP play into this? Like when I purchase, table tents or things that go in the trifold, where does that play into kind of menu innovation in general and highlighting things? Again, my wife enjoys a margarita here and there, and so we'll go places, and sometimes places will have the, casual dining brand will have the margarita of the month, and she might order that versus her normal one because of PLP. I'd love to understand the push and pull of kind of table tents and that, and how does that play into kind of guest experience and what you guys do from a printing perspective.
Well, Rafi and I, we can tag team this. I mean, really, from the technology side, Rafi, I would say, you know, all of our platform, the Dinetec platform, it supports POP, not just menu. I know that this has kind of been a menu specific conversation, but really any piece of collateral material that's in a restaurant that needs to be versioned can be handled. So that can be your table tents, that can be your floor graphics, that can be your window clings, your ceiling danglers for
And menu inserts. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it all falls under the umbrella of variable data print, right?
print. Yeah.
And then these things specifically do have versions. So, our versioning software will version, right? And we'll generate however many versions of these things we need. And then it ends up being, from a production perspective, just another piece of variable data print. So when if we have the data, we have the versioning algorithm that generates the versions that are required. And they're just like another simple menu, I would say. They can be treated as a simple menu with one item.
Well,
And they
and really
usually
where I was going, Rafi, that I'd love to get a little bit of color on is just how does the data play into that? If it's highlighted on the menu versus a POP, have you guys figured out? And again, this is just my own ignorance, if you guys haven't, but I'd love to understand. Does that LTO that gets dropped on the table, does that drive more behavior than highlighting it within the menu? And again, I know this is a little bit of the science that goes behind what
Sure.
it is that you guys do.
sure
I'd just love a little bit of education.
it does. I mean, usually LTOs historically, depending on brand, but usually they roll out, I would say 6 to 8 times a year is some sort of LTO campaign. So whether we're aligning with March Madness or Mardi Gras or anything like that, usually that's it's an event that's really to highlight driving traffic at a specific time. And so you usually change those out more than you would change out your core menu. So you might only change your core menu out twice a year or maybe 3 times a year, but you are constantly going to want to be having some sort of promotion at the restaurant that really is an intention getter to drive to us. And it may be new traffic, it may be repeat traffic, but usually they kind of go hand in hand. So from a POP perspective, we're able to version and print all those type of materials. And then we also kit and pack them all out. So if you've got a LTO promotion for Cinco de Mayo, because you mentioned margarita, we could talk about that later. But since you talked about margarita, that could be a multitude of pieces that are all multi-version that all get packed in one box that goes to the restaurant with specific instructions on how to install that LTO promotion in the restaurant. So we're able to help facilitate that as well.
So yeah, brands learn through experimentation, just like anybody else, right? They're like, we
Mhm.
want to experiment, we want to experiment a lot, and that's where we come in and we facilitate, those like cycles. We truncate those cycles so they can experiment a lot. Historically, they'd have to, to do the LTOs, they have to get all the spreadsheets together. They got to get 6 departments, right? By the time you generate an LTO, it's Q2.
Yeah. Your Cinco de Mayo special didn't get launched till
Right,
July, right?
It's not
right,
more twice, but
exactly. So, in order for them to optimize, their operations, they run endless experiments, and we just give them the platform to be able to do that very quickly, right? So they can just come up if they have their creative, we can get them up and running for an LTO in a matter of less than a week, and they can get their LTO done in 2 weeks, and we'll print it for them. It'll be in restaurant, shortly after, and they'll get their data from their restaurants, and then they'll say, okay, well, we want to do something a little bit different based on the data that we got. So let's run another one. And we just continue to facilitate that process so that they could, kind of zero in on, their, whatever they're running those LTOs for, right? Whatever data they're looking to get.
I
and
love that.
helping it testing. Testing is also
Well, the fact that it's fast, you guys give them the ability
Yeah.
to experiment. It's not a big, long process where they got to do so much work. And so, which really, I guess, leads me kind of to my last line of questioning. Kim, I'm going to start with you. You're going to hear brands out there that say paper menus are dead. They're too expensive. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket. They've got a tablet that can do these things. And you guys have proven not only statistically, but just in life. And I actually have a brand that we do business with who went all digital and quickly, even in their 10K filing, said we had to go back physical because you know what? Tech averages were down. And so I'd love for you guys to talk about how and why physical menus and POP are so critical to the casual dining experience to ensure that you not only drive the behavior that you guys already menu engineered that we talked about, but just in general, even with people having having a pocket in their a phone in their pocket, it's not optimal for going out to eat. You don't go out to eat to look at your phone. You go out to eat to experience food and friends and family and whatnot. So I'd love for you to talk about that.
I was going to say you go out to eat so you don't look at your phone.
Yes. Yes. Although I get really sad when I see people on a date and all they're doing, my wife and I were out for Valentine's Day and I were sitting next to a couple and both of them were sitting on their phone. I'm like, look at each other and talk to each other. So sorry. Maybe my
No,
old, I'm a grumpy old man now. Get off my yard, kids.
that is like when you just go, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to be your last Valentine's Day together, but I'd
Yeah.
love for you to talk about why digital is something that's needed, but as a primary go-to-market, it's not going to benefit the brand the way that you might think it would.
No, I really think, like I said, we eat with our eyes and you want the ordering experience. So it's a very curated thing these days, and there's a lot of thought that goes behind it. I think dining in like the casual dining, fine dining space, it really is about connections. And when you also look at, I know because there was that, during COVID, not to bring all that negativity up, but everybody went to a very short, limited 8.5 by 11 that could actually fit on your phone type of menu. But that was temporary based on the time, right? So as brands add items back, you think about a steak, a casual steakhouse chain that has an 8-page menu. No one wants to scroll through 8 pages of menu items on their phone or their tablets. The likelihood of you stopping and ordering something that either one, it's the first thing that you came to that you wanted to. I mean, you just can't quite control, I don't think, the experience and the order, how you want guests to interact with the menu if it's not physically there. We had done we had partnered with some brands and had done some tests and done some studies, and the physical menu always delivered a higher check average than a digital menu. The guest just interacts with it. You have photos, you have imagery. Like I said, we eat with our eyes. So I think that all comes into it. And I think also people get digitally fatigued. I
Yeah.
mean, you're
So
really going out to eat. Probably should say that with our VP of tech on this call. We get
no, you know what you know what it was, Jeremy, back in the day during COVID, Sandy's CEO called me and he goes, "Hey, you guys are working on digital menus, right? Because we had to, just like everybody else, right?"
Yep.
And we had a considerable amount of print business, right, in this space. And he's like, "Hey, our printed menus going away. This is important, right? As a company, we need to consider that." I had to think a lot about that. I didn't know the answer at the time, but and I didn't think that they were, but and I was proven right, which is great.
It's always nice when
I
your
don't look at
predictions
it
come true.
it's
And it
the
keeps you on a
best.
job.
Yeah, exactly. I said, I don't think so. And and the reason is, like, I look at stuff from a product perspective. I'm a product person, right? I make products. I'm not a marketing person. The marketing stuff is very true. All the stuff we eat with our eyes, and and this is your primary marketing tool when people walk into the door and that kind of thing. But from a product perspective, I think that um, the user experience on a phone is much worse than a menu, and um,
Unequivocally.
and you're forced to search for stuff instead of presented with things. So if you look at it from the user experience perspective, like when somebody says, "Oh, it's on your phone," and to Kim's point, if you have a 15-page menu, you're now in a search, right? You have to search, you have to scroll, you have to squint, you have reading glasses, whatever it is. User experience is terrible. And if the tech works perfectly, forget about if the tech is not working. If you don't have, Wi-Fi or whatever, or somebody's server glitched and now you're not able to get the menu and somebody has to bring you a crappy little paper menu and say, "Well, here's the stuff that we have." So from user experience perspective, I think that a printed menu, which is like this nice big thing that presents things to you rather than you having to go search for stuff, is a much better user experience. And people really, resonate with that user experience rather than the other one. And I feel like that's why it's one of the reasons, at least, why I think they've survived and they're going to continue to survive for a long time.
I agree. And we've also seen where brands are actually adding more collateral back into the restaurants. 2019 and before, you'd have an LTO menu, lunch menu, dinner menu, all these other different types of points of collateral. Then coming out of 2020, going into 21, 22, everybody kind of was like, well, we're going to use a reusable menu, but we're just going to have one menu and see how it goes. because there's also supply chain issues back then, and you really had to
Mhm.
have flexibility to turn on a dime if you needed to. But now we've seen kind of like, and nobody wanted to do promotions, right? So like, well, we don't need to promote. So what I think, and you've probably seen it, Jeremy, and talked to a lot of people too, where it's like, okay, well, now my all day menu is now broken back out to I now have a dinner menu and I have a lunch menu. I've
Mhm.
now reintroduced a beverage menu. We are going to do promotions. So we do have an LTO. So we're kind of looking at the market and our best way to drive traffic into, our restaurant, so to speak. And then more importantly, really having everything in there as a touch point, have a good guest experience because you want that guest to come back. I mean, it's hard to upsell people if they're only ordering in. So we want, as I like to say, we want butts and seats. So we want,
Mhm.
all the touch points that we can help once you get into a restaurant to have a good guest experience. To Rafi's point, the menu makes ordering easy. It makes it a nice experience to go out. You're not searching for stuff. It's right there. It's being presented to you. We've engineered it so we can take you on our own little item menu journey and
Mhm. And
hopefully
you're
make.
highlighting the things that are gonna make them happy that you're gonna be able to execute well and are gonna bring them back and are gonna make you most profitable when done
Yeah.
well. I love that. Rafi, talk to me a little bit about we're 37 minutes into our recording, 38 minutes into our recording, and we've not talked about AI. AI. We're in 2026, and I'm certain AI, you and the CTO, or I don't remember, VP technology, whatever your title is, I'm sure AI, everybody, your CEO is calling and saying, what is AI going to do for our business? I'd love for you to help our listeners understand how can AI help enhance what it is that they're doing with your team to ensure that they're getting the best results for those 500 menus that need to be out there. And how are you guys really even thinking about AI kind of coming into your world and either enhancing or even disrupting what it is that you do? Because it is one of those things that kind of like the internet, I've been around, we've all been around long enough that we remember days before the internet, it changed our world. And now I really believe AI is going to change. And I'd love for our listeners to hear how you guys are thinking about it.
Sure. Yeah. We do think about it a lot. So on the menu side of the business, I think we have some challenges that, along the way, we've been at it for a decade. And along the way, we were able to make giant leaps on one side of the equation and just incremental gains on some of the other things in menu engineering that we know that AI is going to be able to solve for us. Right. So as we look at what are the challenges that AI is going to help us with, one of the challenges really is proof and approval. Right? The proof and approval process is something that remains manual. We look at our solution, end-to-end holistic solution, right? We don't just stop with we generated new menus. Now somebody somewhere has to look at them in 500 versions or 10,000 versions, however many they got, and try and figure out if they're right. Someone has to proof them because if we print them and they're not right, they end up in the store, then we have to reprint them. And it's just this like friction that is unnecessary, right? And humans are not very good at this. I've done proof and approval myself,
Mhm.
and like your eyes glaze over after iteration 3, and then everything could be wrong, and you'd be like, yeah, it's right. So that remains a very kind of time consuming and really error prone process that we're probably going to completely eliminate with AI, right? We're going to be able to tell what your menu data on the way in looks like and what the outputs look like. AI will be able to do the proof and approval for you and say, yeah, this is right. So, with confidence, move forward and print. This is something that takes people weeks at the end of a cycle. And it costs brands. When I say millions, I'm not exaggerating over the course of a year just for proof and approval. They
Mhm.
bring in some brands that we work with, and we work with some of the biggest brands out there, and they have hundreds of versions. And seasonally, they'll bring in three, four, $500,000 worth of temp labor just to do proof and approval.
Yeah, which is insane, but it's needed currently with
Yeah,
humans. And to your point, having AI to augment the human, because there's a lot of
yeah,
people, AI is just going to replace humans. But at the end of the day, how do we make it easier for humans to do the work that needs to get done and ultimately accelerate what it is that we're trying to do anyway?
yeah. That's one. Another, area where AI has a massive impact, and we partner with a great company that actually solves for this problem. In franchise pricing, franchisees turn to corporate and say, I'm owner operator. I don't know how much this stuff should cost for me to make the most amount of money.
Yeah, because they don't really
There's
care. So as long as people
right,
buy it and they can make money at the end of the day,
right.
right?
Exactly. Should the eggs be $5, $6? Am I getting the most out of it? Am I overcharging? I don't know what to do here. Help, right? So, AI has a lot to do with regional pricing, and depending on what part of the country you're at, that plays a big part into how you should price your items, right? Whether there's a shrimp shortage or chicken shortage or whatever the case may be, right? So things cost differently everywhere in the country. And if you're a national brand and you have many different locations spread out across the country, chicken cannot cost the same in all your restaurants. And what should it cost, right? So AI is very good at consolidating regional data and figuring out and optimizing what your price should be based on historical data, based on current market conditions, those kinds of things, right? So it does
Yeah,
a much
that
better
used to be a
job
team
than
of data
humans.
analysts doing that for hours a day of
Yeah,
this is supposed to be 950 versus 975 versus, 995.
exactly.
In certain
And that
stores.
matters a
It does.
lot, right?
Yep.
Whether it's 950 or 975 matters a lot, right? Because times however much you sell, right? Or don't sell because of the $20 difference, that matters a lot. So, AI is really good at stuff like that, right? Take tons of data and synthesize optimal output. So,
And
that's
that
another
used to
area where we're seeing a lot of.
Yep. No, and again, going back to that whole augmenting the human, because somebody needs to still make the decision to your point, but it's now getting them the data versus a full team of data analysts that would be doing that in the past. How do people
Mhm.
engage? Like, we're at 40 some minutes into this show, and I know we could sit and talk forever about menu nerding out and all of those things, but if I'm sitting here and I'm like, you know what? I got 40 units, I got 100 units, I got 200 units, and I'm not using your guys' team. What does the engagement look like? How do they get in touch? Where do they find out about how to get to the place that some of these brands that you guys are talking about that are so effective and just making really killer decisions and saving people time, saving people money, and really enhancing their experience? How do they engage? What does that look like, and what can they expect from your team?
I mean, they can definitely reach out to us. There's obviously Dinetec.com. So they can always reach out to us that way. We can also give you contact information if you want to include it to, reach out to myself or to members of our team. But we do have a coordinated team of people who have do nothing but live in the dining space. So have touched every aspect of it. So can help you, plan and execute your entire, menu process. And like I said, really always kind of considered ourselves to be, a partner. I've had the pleasure of sitting in marketing departments of some of our major brands and really trying to understand their workflow, their pain points, what their marketing and menu initiatives are, and then really putting together a workflow and a plan that helps them meet those objectives. So, a very much of like a partnering relationship.
Yeah, which that's the part I love so much is that you guys aren't just the tech behind creating menus. Or let me work with you to understand where you guys are trying to go and how can I help you get there based on the experience that you guys have across, thousands and thousands of restaurants. What have you seen work? What have you seen not work? And where do they want to go? What have you seen work? And now you guys collaborate and come together to
And
be
I
able to
think
solve that.
that, yeah, because the collaboration and really understanding what the brands and objectives are, I really think give us a because the technology is awesome, but the technology is only as good as us putting a plan into place to drive engagement, drive traffic, put butts in seats, and have that guest
And
come
get them
back.
to order that Philly cheesesteak I was talking about earlier, right?
Get them to order the Philly cheesesteak, and we want to
And the
up
margarita.
with onion rings because we can charge more for those. So we want to be able to upsell the guests once they get into the restaurant and do that. So it's just very much a collaborative, we're just like a partnering team. We really view ourselves an extension of marketing departments and really, if you give us the ball, we will take it and deliver it, at the end and let you be able to track all the way through. Just really, like I said, partnering, understanding where a brand wants to go, getting them the best roadmap to get there, and putting technology to it so we can do it quickly and accurately.
Well, I love what you guys are doing. I love the education I've gotten because now I'm going to watch you guys try to upsell me those onion rings next time I go into a place and I'm
Right.
like, oh, those look so darn good. Because we do eat with our eyes and we do order with our eyes. But now I got a little bit of the inside baseball. Maybe I'll make wiser choices, but chances are not because you guys are one step ahead of me and thousands of menu prints be ahead of me to understand how to get me to get the orders right. So thank you guys for creating that. Thank you guys for coming on and educating our listeners, guys. As I said at the onset, to our listeners, guys, we know you guys have got lots of choices, so thanks for hanging out. Please go check out the team at Dinetec, and if you're not already working with them, please check them out and engage. I'm certain they'll get on the phone with you, and even if you don't work with them right away, they'll kind of help you work through what it is that you guys are looking for. Kim and Rafi, thank you guys so much. And to our listeners, make it a great day.
All right. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Jeremy.
Enjoyed it. Thanks.